Bob, we're live.
Okay, thank you. I would like to call this formal meeting of the Finance Committee of the Board of Trustees of Northern Michigan University to order. Present today are all committee members, Trustee Vice Chair Alexis Hart, Trustee Greg Sepinen, and Committee Member ex officio and Board Chair Steve Young. The purpose of today's meeting is to receive a presentation on proposed tuition and fee structure from Vice President Leach, and to discuss fiscal year 23 tuition and fee rates. So with that, I would ask Mr. Leach to provide a presentation on the subject of today's meeting.
Thank you, Bob. I'm just going to share my screen if I can find it. So we're here to talk about a tuition and fee recommendation for fiscal year 2023. Our goal is to go over state budget factors that are being considered, NMU affordability, university investments, and cost increases, and a recommendation for the tuition and fee rates. Some state budget factors that we're looking at is right now there were three budgets out there. They had the executive budget, which provided a 5% appropriation increase in base dollars, as well as some one-time dollars. The Senate version had 4.4% for Northern, along with some one-time dollars, and included potential for some dollars to pay off MEPSR's liability. The House version had no base increase in funding, but did include some funding to pay off MEPSR's. Recent information is it's probably going to be somewhere closer to the Senate version that gets passed with some MEPSR's relief, but not relief that potentially impacts the ongoing base budget, just future budgets. Tuition restraint language. We don't have clarity on which one is going to be selected. The governor's budget came out at 5% or $626 and had Northern's tuition rate, but allowed for a cap, hard dollar cap of $722. The Senate concurred with that. The House suggested 4.4% tuition restraint or a hard dollar cap of $636. You'll see as I walk through the presentation that we would not be hitting the tuition restraint language. Our recommendation would be below any of those amounts that we see there. When you look at tuition and fee rates, you can see that Northern is second lowest, and we've remained second lowest for quite a few years. There's a gap of $438 below the next closest university, which already set their tuition at 4.9% higher for next year. And we're about $1,900 below the state average in tuition and fees. With the recommendation we're going to make, we'll remain second lowest and probably fall further behind the state average of tuition and fees in the state of Michigan, based on the recommendations. Right now, you've seen ranges of 2.9% to 4.9%, with the median being rated about 3.9% among the schools. The recommendation we plan on making would be the fifth lowest in the state, but also provide that we'd fall further behind the rest at second lowest in the state of Michigan. So our goals as we looked at tuition and fees and our budget as a whole was we really wanted to focus on maintaining affordability, which we believe we'll achieve with the recommendation. Enhance our strong investments financial aid. We currently invest about $20.5 million of our general fund budget in financial aid. That amount we plan on increasing some more next year. We plan on investments in faculty and staff, increase in investments in support of laboratories and new academic programs, as well as existing academic programs, and making some strategic investments in mental health services, diversity, and student support. recruitment of students, and compliance. The other thing we're dealing with is significant inflationary cost pressures on supplies, materials, and equipment, as well as utilities. Inflation is running high, and utilities has been really escalating recently. So that number is a fairly significant piece of our budget. The other piece of our strategic goal, we've been in a strong financial position, and our goal is long-term, we maintain strong financial sustainability, which is critical to the long-term future of the university. The investments that we have identified are investments in faculty and staff of that's about a $2.5 million cost. The increase in financial aid is we're recommending a $0.9 million increase, almost $1 million. That would be a 4.4% increase in financial aid. Investing $300,000 in lab supplies and library acquisitions. Increasing our capital equipment replacement program. There's been more and more needs for newer capital equipment in our academic programs, and we need to keep increasing as those costs increases and the need for new equipment and new technologies in those departments increase. Also, we're making strategic investments in new academic programs, student support and compliance. We're starting up the speech, language, and pathology program. We're adding mental health services. Many of you saw the article recently on that. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, retention, admissions, and Title IX compliance. Where there's a cost to compliance, and those costs have been increasing over time. We also have, it's not on here, addition to the foundation. Some inflationary costs are really the pressures in materials and supplies and equipment, as well as utilities, as mentioned before. The combined estimated investments and cost increases would be $6.1 million. If we look at where we're estimating appropriation at the time we put the documents together, was about $1.5 million appropriation increase, or 3%. Our recommendation for tuition is 3.9%. And we're also looking at potential enrollment decline 2.8%, but that number's been getting much better recently. The net effect of all of those would be utilization of operating reserves in this next fiscal year of about $3.1 million, which would be the budget shortfall. We hope that number will be slightly less as we get closer and enrollment becomes clearer and the final appropriation comes out. But at this time, we were looking at a potential $3.1 million use of reserves to balance the budget this year. Some of the considerations and challenges in coming up with the recommendation was the state budget has not been finalized. Enrollment numbers until we get into August are really not totally clear. A lot of students make late decisions. Utility rates, while we built some dollars in for utilities, we've had some recent increases where they're passing on the fuel charge through our electricity, and that could create a larger jump than what we've projected so far. We're waiting to see if that's just a short-term thing or if it's going to become a longer-term issue. And again, we're planning on using reserves, and depending on where things end up, as we look down the road, there may be a need for additional budget reallocations or potential reductions, depending on all the circumstances defined there. But overall, as I mentioned, we're recommending a 3.9% rate increase. We feel like we're able to enhance student services, enhance recruitment, invest in programs, academic labs, and providing a high quality experience for our students, and a great value for the dollar for attending the university. The makeup of those adjustments, as you can see here, are $238 per semester for resident, non-resident lower division students, $250 per semester for resident, non-resident upper division students. And keep the extension rates the same increase as the on-campus students. Increase grad tuition 3.9% and increase the differential tuitions for clinical lab nursing, natural sciences, and technology and occupational studies by $1 per credit hour. We feel that with the recommendations being made, we'll achieve the goal of maintaining affordable tuition. We'll remain second lowest in tuition and actually fall further behind the other schools that are in front of us. It'll enhance our investments in financial aid with a $900,000 increase or 4.4%. Again, we're investing in our high quality faculty and staff, laboratories, academic programs, making some strategic investments in mental health diversity and student support, as well as addressing the inflationary cost increases that we're incurring right now. And ultimately making sure that we're financially sustainable long term. And at that, I'd like to turn it back over to you, Bob, and the committee.
You're on mute, Bob.
How am I doing now?
Got it.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Gavin. Committee members, any questions? Comments?
Yeah, quick question, Gavin. Quick math on my part. So we're going to remain 13% below the average for tuition and fees. You said that gap has continued to grow. So if I understand correctly, we're kind of getting farther and farther from that average.
Yeah, that is correct. Because many of the schools are increasing tuition and fee at the same percentage as we are that are ahead of us. And with them being at a higher rate, it just compounds the differential between us. Because we haven't been, while tuition restraint has a percentage, we've usually been below that percentage recently.
Okay, very good. I think it's wonderful, even considering the cost increases we've had, inflation. I mean, it's impacting everyone everywhere, that we're still able to keep it as low as it is from an increase perspective.
Thank you, Trustee Hart. Trustee Sepinen, Chair Young, any comments, questions?
The only point I would like to make, Mr. Chair, was that inflation is a real concern that we all have right now. And I think Trustee Hart kind of touched on that. The other is, of course, I'm really glad to see the increase in financial aid that was put in there, which is, I think, another good step.
Great points. Thank you.
If I could ask Mr. Chair a question on of Gavin, how do we compare with our peer institutions in terms of financial aid?
We'd compare quite favorably, especially as a percentage of our overall budget. About 24% of our budget actually goes toward financial aid and assisting students. So we do compare quite well. Everybody's getting more aggressive on it, as are we. But we want to try to ensure we can create the greatest access possible for students.
And so we're putting some additional money in there. Would we still be in that 25% range?
Yeah, it would be 24, I think 24.4%, Steve, if I recall right.
And then if I could, just one other question, Mr. Chair, is in terms of the net costs, Gavin, when you look at that and you net out financial aid, are our net costs similar to peer institutions? Better, worse?
Well, we'd be better off. Our students would be lower, I should say, than the other institutions. I think at 24%, we're second lowest either way, I guess is the answer. And we're actually, we have highly competitive, and I do believe, and it's personal bias, that we create the best education for the dollar. And I heard one of our trustees gave me that idea and that thought, and I do believe it. I believe that to be a true statement. We have great programs, great faculty, and we provide good facilities and equipment for our students, and we're trying to always improve our services that we're providing, and that's part of how we've reflected that in this budget here today.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is this frozen in time concept where we're kind of second lowest, and but yet that gap keeps getting bigger, which is really I think problematic. But I mean, what steps can be taken to try and close that gap? I mean, realistically.
Yeah, realistically, I mean, there's the way the tuition restraint language is structured, it's gonna leave us almost second lowest no matter what we do. We can close it by always going at the high tuition restraint. Like we could have gone higher based on the language that's out there now, but we tried to balance it obviously with affordability for students and access, and so that it's always a balancing act. But the only way to close that gap is to go at the hard dollar cap each year, which would have been $722 compared to, here you're seeing even at the upper division, it would be $500 for the year. So it would still be $200 and some. It would be $200 more than what we're recommending here, but I don't know how much that would close the gap if we did that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one other question from me, and I apologize if I missed this in another slide. Do we know the average increase rates for tuition and fees from other universities in Michigan, the other publics?
This year is a percentage increase. It'll be about 3.9%. It'll be about the average this year. And again, we're at being a lower tuition and being at the average percentage increase drives us lower. So
Exactly. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yep.
One last follow-on question. Chair Young's questions got me thinking about this. What percentage, do you know, what percentage our students receive financial aid?
Wish Mike Pretender were on here, but he's always told me depends on a given year, between 80 and 90% of our students. But more,
wow.
The average is probably more in the 80 to 85% range of our students receive some form of financial aid.
That's a strong number.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also speaks to our core demographic, student demographic, if you will, and that from the data I've seen, given where the majority of our students come from, they tend to have below average household incomes and below average household wealth. And many are first generation college students. So low tuition and financial aid is critical to their ability to just go to college, let alone succeed, stay in and succeed. And I think if I can just ramble for a minute here with a couple of comments on this, and then I'm going to ask for a motion. But I think I'm pleased to hear you adopt that statement that anonymous trustee shared with you.
Who's happening to be talking right now?
I think, this is my 8th year, right? So this is 7 out of those 8 years, I voted for a tuition increase. The other year, we froze tuition. I don't like increasing tuition. It's not something that I take very lightly at all. I feel for our students. Every dollar that we raise in tuition, that's another dollar they have to come up with, and it's not pleasant. I would love nothing more than to see us freeze tuition. And with that, I'm going to be off this board after this year, but I would ask my fellow trustees that are still going to be around to perhaps maybe we need to switch the paradigm around and think about it a little bit differently going forward in terms of, rather than using our benchmark of what everybody else is doing, use our baseline as, what do we do to continue to provide the best education for the lowest dollar in the state, if not the region, and celebrate the fact that our tuition is lower than others. I think a lot of times we tend to get in a defensive mindset that our tuition is lower, well, therefore there must be some sort of discounting of the quality of the product, which is absolutely not the case. And so we should celebrate, and we should, sing it from the rooftops, if you will, that we do have very low tuition, and we should do all we can to try to not just keep it low, but to try to freeze that tuition whenever possible. This year, I think we have some very strong headwinds that prevent us from doing that. The state budget situation is number one. Inflation, as Trustee Sepinen and others pointed out, is a big, big factor. We have wage increase obligations baked into our new union contracts that we have to honor. We have a declining enrollment situation, which leads me to my last comment that this being my swan song year, if you will, the question that I ask myself is, okay, how do we reduce future tuition increases? It's one thing to say it, but we got to have a strategy. I think just on a high level, looking beyond this upcoming year, the solution lies in strengthening our existing programs first and foremost, but also introducing new programs that are going to attract students to Northern that otherwise aren't looking at Northern right now. And then thirdly, look at new sources of revenue. And I think we have a few opportunities out there, and the board and administration should take a very close look at those to see how those can help us keep future tuition rate increases to a minimum. So with all that, I am convinced that we do need this tuition increase, and I would ask this committee to make a motion in that regard, and I'll look for that motion now.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the formals as presented.
Support.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say, with your last statement, I agree with that. And hopefully we still have you as chair for a few more months, and we can enlist your help in the committee in looking at some of those ideas before your term ends. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion before us. I believe that the motion's been properly read. Yes. Okay. I just have a different script than you do, Alexis. That's why I'm asking. Okay, so with that, I will ask for the vote on the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I believe that concludes our business for today. Correct?
Yep. And I think we stay on the same Zoom, and that'll carry us into the next session. Correct, Kathy? Okay.
And then that next session begins at 2:30?
Yep.
Okay, so we have about 4 minutes.
Yep.
If I could, I just had a text too, Kathy. I think it doesn't look like Missy's going to be able to join, so I think that leaves us with 6, right? We'll still be okay.
Yeah.
Tammy and Missy. Okay, I just wanted everybody to be aware. She said she's got something's come up, so